Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Frictionless Developer Experience Talk, and my name is Tom Wilson. I'm CEO of Hyper, a startup, and we build a API service that wraps around cloud services. Love JavaScript, love APIs, love the web, and enjoy doing a bunch of other things when I have time. I've got two little kids that keep me busy as well. But I really want to talk to you guys today about some lessons that we've learned in the development space. And to start off, just kind of a precursor to some of the things that I'm going to share today, want to just reiterate to test all the things. A lot of these things that I'm going to share as far as creating a frictionless development experience kind of has a precursor of writing tests and writing reliable automatable tests, because when you have those tests, then you can really enter into a world of automation, which is pretty cool. So in the context of what is kind of driving this frictionless development experience is happy developers. So I believe, and developers I work with to believe, if developers are happy, you're going to create quality products. And with quality products, you're going to create happy customers. So our mission is all about creating happy developers, and there will be some really great outcomes with that. And with this frictionless development experience, here's one of the developers on our team, Trip, basically has been in the biz for 25 years and totally loves the way that we kind of build code. So hopefully you guys get some ideas on this. This is not a prescriptive process. This is what we've found out that works really well for us. But I think some of the tools here can help you integrate into your processes and give you a frictionless experience. So today we're going to kind of go through what is a happy developer at a high level, a little definition of friction, and then talk about some of the things that create friction in the workplace, and then summarize and provide some resources that you can take a look at later. With that said, how do we get happy developers? Now, there's a lot of answers to this. These are kind of three high-level things that I've found in my career. And the first always starts with motivation, and basically, providing developers a reason to work on your products and work in your teams, like competitive salary, benefits, etc. I think that's pretty much a no-brainer. That's the first kind of step to happiness as a developer. Another one is intrinsic motivation, right? The ability to have autonomy, to be part of the decision-making process, the ability to grow and learn and establish mastery in the fields that interest you the most. And then finally, purpose, right? Build things that matter, that make a difference. So, and that's been talked about a lot. I think that's a very important thing when it comes to developers and giving them happiness. And then finally, the point of this talk and a little bit of my add-on is frictionless development experience, right? How many in here love to be at meetings all day? Just love it, right? Feel most productive in that meeting all day and every day. Or how many of you like to really spend a lot of time doing things that have no purpose, right? Not a lot of fun when you're working. So we'll talk about some of those things, but just to level set and define friction, it's a force of resisting relative motion, right? Developers are happy when they're solving problems within a flow or a relative motion. And I've got this picture kind of showing you this path, and this is how I think some of the development teams I've been in the past have been. There's been this path to get things done, but it's a little rocky, right? You got to watch where you're stepping. You got to make sure that you don't trip and fall, but you can get through the process. And my goal has always been like, how can we turn that into kind of a paved road so that when we need to get from A to B, it's just jump in the highway and go, than this kind of path with friction. So what are those things? Meetings, chores, interruptions, right? Even interruptions that are valuable can create friction. If you're in a flow and you're trying to get something complete and you get interrupted, that can be disrupting, right? So let's drill into those a little bit. Let's look at meetings. Meetings are used to, inform, decide, and instruct, but you can also think about ways to kind of optimize those meetings. It's very good to have a productive meeting. Productive meetings are great. What we did at Hyper was we took the time, as a startup, we're a small company, but we took the time to really hone in on our vision, our values, our principles, best practices, and really create a repository of that documented, that's fluid, that we maintain. And these things become our decision matrix. So oftentimes our developers are able to be more autonomous and make decisions on their own based on these guidelines. So that's one way to really optimize for meetings, so you're not just meeting for meeting's sake. Another thing is with stand-ups. Stand-ups are great, but we've taken the track of just posting them in our chat. Here's what we're working on. And we can always kind of use these values and best practices to make sure that we're on track. Chores, right? Set up environments, automate deployments. How many of you started on a team and spent like a week setting up your development environment just so you could start coding, right? That was awesome. How many of you actually said, you know what, I'm going to document this for the next person that comes in and they won't have to take the time, and then gave up, right? But that's really important, right? When you have that development environment configured exactly how you want it, you can just jump in and go. Automating deployments. How many of you guys have automated your pipeline so when code is released on your master branch, it automatically goes to production? Cool, we've got a few. That's very empowering, right? That feels good. If you have to, and maybe no one has to do this, but I remember times that we had to schedule a deployment at like 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning to make sure we didn't disrupt our user flow. That was a long time ago, but that's no fun. Maintain dependencies, right? Code changes, security vulnerabilities pop up. Having to go and keep all of your dependencies up to date can be challenging. So what we really focused on is to build tools, automated tools, and generalize them as much as possible. For example, our releases, whether they're libraries or whether they're applications, we use a general tool called tag and release that just does the right thing, and we only have to maintain that one tool instead of having to have special tools for every single app that we build. So we really try, if we're going to automate, we try to generalize. And as general as we can make it, that means the less work we have to do to keep that up. But that's one way. And then finally, interruptions. And there's a lot of good things about interruptions. I mean, I think interruptions are just part of it, but at the same time, I think there's some tools out there that we've started using that minimizes these interruptions. And when I kind of talk about interruptions, I mean, teammates that may have questions, or onboarding and training, right? Just bringing someone up to speed or onboarding them, or doing merges and code reviews. If you're working on something and then you have to turn and do a code review, and it's a mountain of code. That can really be hard to get back to what you're working on. So that's kind of an interruption, but I think they're very important. I definitely think that those have value. I just think that we kind of rethought ways to do these things in order to optimize our development flow, and try to share some of that with you. The first one, merges and pull requests. To give you a short story, back in a few teams before Hyper, we would do what's called feature branch development. And if you use Git or Git Hub or GitLab, you can create branches in your source, and then you can pull those down, and you can pull them and name them a feature, and then you work through your stories. And when you complete all your stories, then you merge that branch up to the rest of your team. And that was pretty cool. That worked great. That way I could work on a feature, and my buddy Trip could work on a feature, and Tyler could work on a feature, but then we would have, kind of this kind of merge party, right? So you're working in a sprint, gets close to the end of the sprint, everybody's like, okay, we need to get together, have maybe a lot of coffee or maybe a lot of other drinks, and just work on merging each other's code in. And that could be frustrating at times. So we really wanted to think about how we could resolve that, and we took a look at continuous integration and continuous deployment. Those are kind of buzzwords, but we really looked into that and really dug into what is continuous integration. And when we dug in, we found this thing called trunk-based development. And trunk-based development is this idea of committing your changes, even if your feature is not complete, straight to trunk, right? Straight to your trunk, which needs to be always deployable for production. So when I brought this idea to our team, there was the reaction. They said, what? What are you talking about? Wait. This is not right. What about keeping the main branch deployable? What about code reviews? How are we going to do code reviews if anyone can just check in the code in the main branch? What about automated testing? When's that going to run? And what if we break the build, right? So all these things came up, and we had a very long discussion about these things. And I said, well, this sounds like a really good idea, because if we can save time on these merge parties, and let's dig in and really try to figure this out. And we started digging in, and but before we do that, just to explain continuous integration. Continuous integration is this idea that if we're always working together on the same code branch, same code base, and then we constantly update each other's code, then there's a lot less to deal with at that point in time. So if I commit my code every time I get up out of my chair, which could be multiple times a day, then there's a lot less code that I've done that my teammates has to review or evaluate, right? So you're kind of just breaking things down into smaller pieces instead of working 2 weeks and then trying to merge all of that code after that 2-week sprint. Does that make sense? So we started looking at that, and we came up with a compromise. And that compromise is short-lived pull requests. And what short-lived pull requests are is, if you're not pair programming, which was what some of the trunk-based documentation said, just pair program, then you code review, you do all your evaluation as a pair. But we all work at home, remote, and we can pair, but we're also working on different parts of the product. So we lean to short-lived feature branches. Short-lived feature branches means that you instead of looking at a big feature, you break it into small pieces or a checklist, and then take a couple of approaches so that every time you get out of your chair, you can commit your code into trunk via this short-lived pull request. And each member of your team just sort of commits to, if there's a pull request within 15 minutes, I'll code review it and pass it through. And the nice thing about this is the distraction is minimal, and because you're only usually looking at a few lines of code, not 15 pages of code. So you can quickly review it and you can get back to what you're doing. So that's what we adopted, and we really enjoyed it. It was something that covered our, wait, what about all these things? Because we were doing pull requests, but it allowed us to move faster. And there was a couple of other things. So how do we take those ideas and implement it in practice? And we took a couple of patterns. One pattern was feature flags. So feature flags is you code and you ship your code into your deployable branch, but you wrap it around these feature flags. So even though that code may go into production, it's kind of turned off. And then in another point in time, you can just flip a flag and turn it on, and it's there. A product called Launch Darkly is very popular with this, but you can just create, a config file and just a couple of if statements to hide your code. And then when it's deemed ready to be released, you can just flip the flag and it's ready. The other practice that we used is called branch by abstraction. And branching by abstraction is when you check out your short-lived pull request, you just provide a not implemented proxy or API in front of whatever feature you're working on. So if anybody calls it from your team, it just returns a nice not implemented, no one home, just a nice little message so they know that this is the API they're going to be calling, but it's not working. It's not built yet, but it doesn't break anything. It doesn't throw an error and shut down your code. That's a great way to deal with the ability to deploy, but not break the build. And it empowered our team to commit to the main branch several times a day. So we commit, I think one time we did, and it's just a team of 3 of us, we did almost 20 pushes to our master or our main branch in one day, which is pretty crazy. With code reviews, with pull requests and everything. Now, when you work remote and you're pulling your source code down on your local computer and you need to do a code review, we found that created some friction. So part 2 was to really dive into this cloud development environment. So we actually don't have any source code on our local computers. We use a cloud development environment service to minimize context switching. So we can have our environment in one tab, and then in another tab, have the pull request that we're going to review. Review that, make sure everything's working, push that in, approve that review, and then we can go back to our tab that has our development environment and keep working. And that really got my team excited, right? They loved it. Now, there's always pros and cons or trade-offs. If the internet's not working, my mind, go to a coffee shop, get some coffee, right? Because you're going to find yourself, there's not much you can do with the internet being down these days. But you can make that argument. There are platforms that may be a little bit hard to work in a cloud environment, but I did get an Android development platform working through a VNC, so that was kind of cool. So you can do a lot more than you may think. And when we started doing this, it was kind of rocky at first because everybody had their own way to do it. We used Visual Studio Code, and it actually launches through a tool called Gitpod. And but once we kind of got acclimated to this type of flow, we really were able to move fast, really able to move without friction. And I'll try to demo that a little bit, but there was a couple of benefits of that. One was the easy ability to do code reviews and pull requests, and really share sessions. So if I was stuck on something, I could get a teammate to actually open a tab on their system and see my environment, connect to my environment real time. But one of the benefits for me, because I'm always thinking about bringing new developers in or bringing folks in, is this idea of onboarding. If you guys spent weeks to kind of build your development environment, could you imagine if you just clicked a button and in a minute, that development environment was ready for you to write code? And then when you committed it to Git, had a code review pull request, then it's in production. Would that not be the ultimate onboarding experience, right? And that's what we do. So every time we launch a development environment, we're onboarding ourselves. So we can't build a bunch of really weird ways to set up our environment, or we feel that pain every time we open our environment. So it kind of works as this guard to make sure that we're always having an effective onboarding environment for any team members that may come on board. Does that make sense? Cool. So there's many of these things out there. There's GitHub code spaces. There's Nix if you like super technical stuff. And we went with Gitpod. Gitpod integrates with all the version control services like GitLab, GitHub, and Git, what was the other one? Bitbucket. So to use it at the easiest is you just take a gitpod.io URL and then you do a pound sign or a hash and then your repo URL. And then it'll walk you through the process of spinning up a GitHub or a Visual Studio desktop online. So let's see, home, yeah. So I've got this Gitpod environment and I can, use it just like any development environment. It's just like Visual Studio, it's just in a web browser. So I'm gonna do some really intense coding demo here, live demo. There's this new language called HTML. It's really hard. And bear with me, there may be some problems with this, so maybe you guys can help me out. Getting there. There we go, 2021. So you got an editor. It's got syntax highlighting. You've got all your Visual Studio plugins that you like. And then you got, runtimes on here. Here we have Node. We can do MPX and W3, a little web browser. And look at that, my web server is running. So I can just open that browser up. And there it is. I'm developing, right? And I get feedback. It's got full capability to my Git, so I can push this code to GitHub, and I can actually install a web extension that takes any repo that I have and puts this little Gitpod button on it. If I create an issue, then I can open that issue and then click this Gitpod button, and it's going to go ahead and create a branch for me. And it's going to launch an ephemeral development environment with my code checked out, all my services running, ready for me to develop. And then when I check it in, it's going to set me up to create a pull request. So I just check it in, go to GitHub, hit create pull request, and hit my buddy Tyler to do a code review. And then Tyler goes in and opens this in his Gitpod, runs the test, makes sure everything looks good, tells me all the typos I made. But of course I've ran my linter, I've ran my formatter, and I've ran my test before I checked it in. But then he tells me all the best practices I missed. So he's able to coach me through that and just write comments in GitHub or in Gitpod, and they show up on the pull request, and then I can go and resolve them. And then once that's done, can merge it, and out to production it goes. So that's really cool. And I wish I could spend more time demoing this, but this is really easy to play with. And you can load Docker environments, Docker containers, Docker Compose, MongoDB, SQLite, just about anything that you use on your normal development environment, you can load in there. So it's really cool, worth checking out. It has changed the velocity that we build and ship. We literally do ship stuff every single day. And then we wrap them around feature flags and turn them on when we're ready to turn them on. So those are the two biggest things that I think really moved us from, kind of a cool dirt road to this paved road of frictionless development. So again, I think that having a strong developer flow is a big component of developer happiness. And I think you should check out short-lived feature branches and cloud development, because it radically reduced the friction in our life cycle. And I think you can integrate it in yours as well. And with that, thank you.